Before we dive into hearing the words chanted aloud from the scroll, I want to talk about them a little bit. According to Jewish tradition, today is the birthday of the universe. Last night, as the sun slipped beneath the horizon, we marked the closing of a grand cycle, the end of the year 5782 by the reckoning of the Jewish calendar. I suspect most of us in this room may not consider that to be scientifically accurate, but it still presents us with a valuable opportunity to reflect on the passage of time and to consider what has changed and what has remained constant since last Rosh Hashanah, and to think about the intentions that we carry with us into a new year ahead. For me, on this first Rosh Hashanah as the new rabbi of B'nai Havurah, my So my list of changes since last Rosh Hashanah is long. It's a long list. It's been a very big year for me and my family, and I find myself in a different home, a different job, a different community, not just 1 year older, but 1,279 miles from where I was a year ago. So more than usual on this Rosh Hashanah, I have beginnings on my mind. And even if you didn't personally take that kind of a journey, I don't have to tell you, this past year, the world around us has been in a great state of flux. Every synagogue and church community that I know about is hoping this year will be a time of rebirth after a long, difficult hibernation. It's a global, spiritual, fresh start moment. So today I want to explore with you 3 Jewish creation teachings to guide us as we begin to recreate ourselves and our relationships and even our community in the coming year. The first teaching comes from the great Kabbalist Isaac Luria. According to Luria, the original primordial state was a state of supersaturated godness. In the beginning, there was only God, nothing else. God was everywhere and in everything in a way beyond our comprehension, and there was no room for anything but God. But there was a certain loneliness to this state of things. The great oneness longed to love, and love requires mutuality. Love requires an other. So God conceived of creation, but there was no place to put creation, so the great oneness contracted into itself to make some space. This contraction was called tzimtzum. And according to a later rabbi, the Hasidic master Rabbi Nachman, who we studied on Slichot, that space was called the halal hapanui, the void. Like a cosmic womb, the halal hapanui provided a space for created beings to exist both within and yet apart from their creator. So the first creative act, according to this version of the creation story, wasn't to add anything to the world. It was not to make anything at all. The first step was to make nothing. Space. It may be paradoxical, but it's easy to see how this applies to our own more modest creative projects. It's like my mother always taught me the first step to cooking a great meal is doing the dishes. You have to make space for creation to happen. It might be physical space, it might be emotional space, it might even be logistical space. Room for something or someone new in our schedules, in our hearts, in our minds, and that may require some release. This Rosh Hashanah, whether your New Year's resolution is to create stronger family relationships, a new exercise regimen, or the perfect living room. It's going to take time, and it's going to take trade-offs. We simply can't do it all at once. And we can't do it when our minds are preoccupied and unavailable. Only by locating and releasing the clutter can we make room for the important new things to grow. I suspect you probably know what your own clutter is. It may be actual physical clutter. It may be a bad habit. It may be some kind of recurring anxiety that takes a lot of energy without doing a lot of good. It may not be anything negative at all, just too many commitments to too many worthy causes. It may be attachment to something from the past or some unattainable expectation of the future. I want you to just actually take a minute now to imagine letting go of some of your clutter in the coming year. Just identify at least one thing you want to let go of and release to make space for some new worthy something in your life in the coming year. So what's the thing you're going to let go of if you can? Just take a minute, identify that thing, remember it. We're going to keep going, but don't forget what that thing was. We're going to move on to another piece of creation wisdom. And for this, I'd like to turn to the famous opening sequence of the Torah, which we'll be chanting very soon. I have the honor of chanting it this morning. Genesis chapter 1. In the beginning, God created heaven and earth. The earth was tohu vavohu. Very hard to translate, tohu vavohu. Chaos, formlessness, mess, with darkness over the surface of the deep. And the Spirit of God fluttered over the face of the waters. God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. Notice that the scene here is never entirely empty. We might have imagined from Luria's Tzim Tzum story that we just heard that once the empty space was made, God spoke cleanly into the void and made good things one at a time in a very orderly fashion. Light, dark, water, earth, plant, animal, human. Bravo. But that was later. First, there was tohu vavohu, chaos, formlessness, mess. The creation lesson I learned from this passage is don't be afraid of making a mess. Mess is an inevitable part of the creative process. I'll give you an example. One of the most creative people I know is my husband, Raj. He's in here somewhere. I can't see where exactly. His medium is food. Yes, I have been blessed to marry a professional chef, and I promise I will share him with you. So Raj is, in other arenas of life, a bit of a neat freak. When we lived near the ocean, he would get squeamish about our boys tracking sand into the car, and he never quite understands what I love about getting my hands dirty in the garden. He hates to leave dishes in the sink overnight, so he's most of the time, very orderly. But when Raj is cooking in the kitchen, his mess control flies out the window. Vegetable peels, packaging, utensils pile up in a jumble in the sink. Towels, bowls, scraps, spices spill out over the counter. To the uninitiated, it can be rather frightening. But all of that mess is part of his genius. It wouldn't work well if he felt the need to restrain the chaos. Eventually, we get it all cleaned up, and the delicious results end up beautifully presented in their proper places. But the times that we've tried to do that along the way never quite tasted as good. So for our third creation wisdom text, I want to turn to a moment in the story of the creation of the first human beings, the moment after the first big human mess, the fall from grace, when Adam and Eve disobeyed God's command and ate from the forbidden fruit. The reason I want to focus there is that this moment is the critical juncture where humans begin to become creators. Only after we're exiled into the world will we need to build and to cultivate, and only then do human beings begin to have children. So let's look at what happens in chapter 3 of the book of Genesis. Starting with verse 7, the Torah tells us that after they ate of the fruit, the eyes of both of them were opened, and they perceived that they were naked, and they sewed together fig leaves and made themselves loincloths. They heard the sound of Adonai Elohim in the garden in the breeze of the day, and the man and his wife hid from Adonai Elohim among the trees of the garden. And Adonai Elohim, which means God, called to Adam and said, Ayeka, where are you? You can imagine many commentators have been troubled by this line. Why is God asking them where they are? Of course, God knows where they are. God knows everything, at least this version of God. So what is that question, Ayeka, really about? God doesn't ask those first human beings this question in order to find them. God asks them this question in order for them to ask it of themselves. As human beings become creators, God seems to think it's important for them to take time to become more aware of themselves and their world. Ayeka, where are you? Where are you? This is the final point that I want to learn out of our creation stories. When we undertake any creative project, we need to open our eyes, look at where we stand, and start there. We can't start anywhere else. Ayeka, where are you? What wounds do you bring? What yearnings? What gifts and talents? What resources? And what is needed in your world? Ayeka, where are you? Find where you are and start there. So now we have 3 ideas about how to create. Make space, make a mess, and start where you are. Make space, make a mess, and start where you are. Instead of leaving these ideas in the abstract, I just want to take a couple minutes to apply them now to the grand creative project which concerns each and every one of us here. The ongoing creation of our sacred and caring community as we emerge into this new chapter. First, make space, literally. If we want B'nai to flourish as a caring and sacred community, we are going to need to figure out our physical space. Now that the pandemic is relenting, we finally have the blessing of being able to come together in person. So far, our physical gatherings have been full of joy, vitality, and connection, which have been a healing balm to the wounds of the pandemic. And even though I hope and expect we will continue to create regular online gatherings as well, soon it will be time to make a decision about where our sacred physical gathering place will be for at least the next few years. In the short time I've been here, I've learned that this consequential conversation has been happening for a long time, for years. It seems a decision won't be easy, but a decision must be made. It will take vision, compromise, courage, listening, and substantial resources to cultivate a physical home where B'nai can thrive into the future, wherever that may be, on Ohio Street, in this church, or some other space altogether. It's not easy or cheap to make an inclusive, functional, and attractive physical sacred space. And it's not going to be instantaneous. But that physical home is essential to the future of this community. Even so, physical space is not the only kind of space we're going to need. To reach our potential as we emerge into a post-pandemic world, our congregation will need to take space in our hearts, in our homes, like the gifts of the heart that Kate was talking about, space in our schedules. It will be up to all of us to make an honored place for newcomers, to welcome them with open hearts. It will be up to us to practice the Jewish value of hospitality, inviting others, especially new folks, to share a Shabbat or holiday meal, offering to host things in our homes. It will be up to us to make space in our calendars, prioritizing this community as we navigate multiple demands on our time. And what about the mess making? As Parker Palmer writes in Let Your Life Speak, listening for the voice of vocation, chaos is the precondition to creativity, and any organization or any individual that doesn't have an arena of creative chaos is already half dead. The spiritual gift is to know that creation comes out of chaos, and that even that which has been created needs to be returned to the chaos every now and then to get created in more vital form. Well, these past few years have certainly returned all of us to the chaos, one way or another. And luckily, B'nai and other Reconstructionist communities met this time of challenge with a predisposition to embrace change. We know that if we want our Jewish lives to be vital and relevant, we need to try new things. We knew it before the pandemic. In these years of tohu vavohu, that innovative spirit brought new forms and ways of connecting that will definitely endure. And we know that even if the world goes back to normal, we will keep experimenting, whether in the recon lab, or with online or outdoor programming, or new forms that we have yet to explore together. Not every pilot project will take off, but some of them will, in directions we never even imagined when we started. Any good CEO knows if some new initiatives aren't failing completely, the company isn't taking enough risks. We will need to take some risks and invite in some messiness, even if we sometimes fail. We have to be ready for that. And finally, like Adam and Eve as they began their creative adventures, we are called to figure out where we stand and start there, asking ourselves a question from the Garden of Eden, Ayeka, where are you? And where are we this year as a community? What are our hopes and dreams, and what are our basic needs? Where are the talents and passions and resources of our members? And where do we stand in the world? What opportunities do we as a community have to impact the world around us for the good? And what does that world need from us? Right now, I offer these only as questions, and I look forward to listening deeply with you to find those answers together in the coming months. In the daily liturgy, there's a beautiful prayer that expresses gratitude for the gift of ongoing creation which sustains us every moment. It calls God by the name HaMechadesh Bechol Yom Ma'aseh Bereshit, the one who renews each day the work of creation. The insight here is that creation is not actually an event far, far away in the mysterious mists of the past. It did not happen 5,783 years ago only, or billions and billions of years ago at the moment of the Big Bang. For B'nai, it didn't just happen several decades ago when the community was founded. Creation is constant, around us, within us, and from us. Tzimtzum is always making space. Tohu vavohu is always filling it with creative chaos, and a great voice is always calling to us, Ayeka, where are you? What is your place in this intricate and wondrous universe? As we enter this new year together and reflect about how to direct our own creative energies in the year to come, may we be blessed with a generosity of spirit, making time and space for one another. May we have the patience and flexibility to forge a common vision and a solid plan for our shared physical space. Please, God. May we be granted the faith with which to cultivate creative chaos and transform it into beauty. And may we find the courage and hope to honestly assess where we stand, our shortcomings, and our great potential, so that we may offer up all of these as each of us creates ourselves and our community anew. Shana Tova.